As we drive into Penshurst, we have the nerve-wracking experience that we frequently encountered in this part of Kent, of finding ourselves about to cross a narrow bridge with no warning that it was approaching or any clue if one lane or another had the right of way in crossing. But then we arrived in Penshurst and there was a nice ivy-covered pub with magenta flowers, so all was quickly forgiven. Now we are in the village of Penshurst, and Ian decided we should come here. Ian, why are we here?
Just because I heard that it was an interesting village with a manor house, Penshurst Place, that was owned by Henry VIII, and it looked like it might be interesting, but I don't know much about it, to be honest.
All right, let's go discover Penshurst together.
Penshurst really is another picturesque Kentish village. I saw the back of this horse and I thought it was a zebra statue, and then I walked up and I saw it was blinking. It's a real horse and it's got furry feet like a hobbit. Well, Penshurst is a very lovely village, but I'm very disappointed about something. This Fur House Tea Rooms has ridiculously good reviews, and I would absolutely love to come here for tea. But they don't open until 2 p.m. and we will be long gone and on to another place we need to be by then. Though it looks like a castle, Penshurst Place is actually a defended manor house. Penshurst is one of England's oldest family homes. It was built in 1341 and it has been owned by members of the nobility and the royal family, including the Dukes of Buckingham, Anne of Cleeves, and Henry VIII himself. At the heart of this historic house is the Baron's Hall, one of the earliest examples of a medieval domestic hall in the country. The adjoining staterooms contain a vast collection of tapestries, furniture, portraits, porcelain, and armor. The historic formal gardens of Penshurst provide a great example of Elizabethan garden design, with records dating back to 1346. The 11 acres of walled and yew-hedged garden provide rooms with a variety of form, foliage, and bloom all year round. The knot gardens in Penshurst are some of the first in the country, dating back to 1502. Henry VIII would come and stay here at Penshurst when it was a hunting lodge, and he was courting Anne Boleyn at nearby Hever Castle. The house isn't open yet, so we're going to explore the gardens first. Porcupine is here because it is part of the family crest of the Sidney family. And now I know why the cafe is called the Porcupine Pantry. If you go up through this lavender to this viewing platform, you get a nice view of the Union Jack part of the garden, although it'd be a lot better to see it from a drone. Nice lily pond with some pink lilies and some very big fish. This is the Heraldic Garden, and it reminds me of one I walked through at Hampton Court Palace 2 months ago. I'm wondering if these are symbols from family crests, like here is the porcupine. This appears to be some fancy sundial sculpture contraption I don't understand. Razor blades on the side. This avenue of Bramley apple trees was planted to commemorate the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. In 1953. For not being a castle, it looks pretty castle-y. I love big castle doors like this that have a big door and then a little door within it. The Baron's Hall was built in 1341 and is considered to be the best preserved example of a 14th century domestic hall of this type. It's interesting because we see so many great halls, but first of all, they don't all have this stature. This ceiling is extremely tall. And secondly, they are usually remodeled into a more modern era So the fact that this still looks very medieval is fantastic. This is the Minstrel's Gallery, and above it is some of the original windows. The ceiling, in fact, is 60 feet high. And you can still see in their original condition the roof timbers of chestnut, which is considered as strong but lighter than oak. Around the top of the wall on the collar beams are life-size wooden structures, which are arched braces for the ceiling. These are so unusual, and these sculptures are thought to be satirical representations of peasants and workers at the manor. In the painting, the woman shown here in the green dress and hat is Her Majesty Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. And here in this painting is an example of one event that took place here in the Great Hall, known as the Baron's Hall. The man to the left and the woman in blue are the Viscount and Viscountess, I assume the owners of Penshurst Place at the time this event took place. These 15th century trestle tables, of which there are 2 in the hall, are massive, and what makes them so special is they are the only surviving examples of their kind. This is the state dining room, also known as the solar. In medieval times, this is the room where the family would retreat for some privacy, or to which the ladies would retire after things got out of hand downstairs in the Baron's Hall. This is my favorite part of the room. Here in the wood paneling on the wall is a tiny window that you look in to check on the activities down in the Baron's Hall. I only learned about squint windows a couple days ago, but this one's really fantastic. These are my favorite paintings in the room. The one on the left is Robert Sidney, the 1st Earl of Leicester. And next to it is a painting of his wife Barbara and 6 of their children. Robert and Barbara died in the early 1600s. There's a fun story behind this painting. I first heard the story in Sir Walter Scott's home, Abbotsford, in the Scottish borders. That house has an illustration of the same event. Elizabeth I was at a ball in 1581, where members of the court and the Sidney family from Penshurst were having a grand old time. QE1 was a fan of the spicy dance called La Volta. In the dance steps, the male partner lifts up the female dancer, and as we can see here, Elizabeth's special friend, Robert Dudley, was hoisting her into the air as they danced La Volta at this soiree. For Elizabethan times, this would have been quite scandalous and even lewd. It's likely that the Virgin Queen did not know about the existence of this painting, as she most certainly would have disapproved. This room is called the Queen Elizabeth Room because Elizabeth I would have used it to give audience when she came here on her many visits. The chairs have the same pattern as the huge tapestry on the wall. I really love this room. I walked in and just went, wow. This is known as the tapestry room, and it has some pretty massive and beautiful tapestries in it. This tapestry, which looks like it's got some mythological gods, a 17th century Brussels tapestry. This huge vertical tapestry is from the 16th century. This painting of Charles I is just huge, so tall. So I just learned something interesting about why that huge 12-foot by 7-foot painting is so dark. It's because it is a copy of a Van Dyck. The original Van Dyck painting is in Windsor Castle, and I do believe I saw that 2 months ago when we went to visit. This copy here was done by a copy artist. So in the day, the aristocracy that couldn't afford to have masters like Van Dyck paint paintings for their home, they would get a copy artist, and these copy artists could not afford to use the really expensive paints that the masters did. So their cheaper paints over time become very dark, especially those who were copying the browns that Van Dyck would use. This woman who looks like Elizabeth I is actually Lady Barbara Gamage, the wife of Robert Sidney, the first Earl of Leicester. She died in 1621, and I showed her portrait with her 6 children in the solar. Here is another copy artist. This painting is of Queen Elizabeth I. This is a painting of King Edward VI, a copy of the original. And Edward VI is important to Penshurst Place because he is the monarch that gifted this estate to Sir William Sidney in 1552. This room is the Long Gallery, and it was built for a couple purposes. One was to show off your fancy portraits, and the other was to give you a place for taking exercise, something that I have learned in my many visits to National Trust and historic houses, manor houses, many of whom have long galleries on an upper floor of the house. Here's Ian getting his exercise in the Long Gallery. Not that we need it. We're walking 10 miles a day around all these huge castles. This is a still from the BBC adaptation of Wolf Hall about Thomas Cromwell. And you can see that it was filmed here in this room. There's a still of another scene filmed in this room, also from Wolf Hall. This one shows Mary Boleyn, Jane Seymour, and Anne Boleyn. Another still of Claire Foy portraying Anne Boleyn in this room. And these are costumes from the 2008 film, The Other Boleyn Girl. So lots of dramas about Mary and Anne Boleyn have been filmed in this area near their family home. Here's another of the Sidney family porcupines. Of course, my family crest would have 4 things: a raven, an otter, a puffin, and a hedgehog. This is the paneled room. This room is known as the Nether Gallery. It houses an impressive display of armor and weapons. This is an executioner's sword. This is a funeral helm of Lord Sidney from 1586, and that is the family porcupine on top. This, of course, is the kitchen. And we couldn't resist getting a slice of cake from the Porcupine Pantry Cafe. We tried the carrot cake, which was delicious despite being gluten-free.
Before leaving Penshurst, we decided to pop into the parish church for a minute to check it out. To get there, we walked through this Leicester Square. Yes, the original Leicester Square, full of old timber-framed buildings. And on the left of the square is the old Guild House. It is one of only 2 such guild houses left standing in England. It's believed to be from 1475. You enter the churchyard through this walkway, and if you turn around, you'll see written across the beam that frames it this saying, "My flesh also shall rest in hope."
The royal crest above one of the entrances to the church. I've never seen one of these before. It's a medieval dole table, and it's one of only a few left in English churchyards. The dole was a small portion of food or clothing or money that was placed on this table for the poor to come and collect on special occasions, such as St. Thomas's Day, the 21st of December. It was placed here right in front of the main entrance to the church. This parish church here in Penshurst is known as the St. John the Baptist Church. It has been a site of prayer and reflection for 900 years. And this building, which is grade 1 listed, has architecture from 7 different centuries. There has definitely been a church here in Penshurst since 1115, but there may have been a church on the site since before Norman conquest. The first thing I noticed coming in the door is this font. It is the most brightly colored font I think I've seen in an Anglican church. Reminds me of how every time you go to a cathedral, they talk about how the cathedral used to be painted in all these bright colors. And it's kind of like they wanted to restore that colorful medieval look to this font. What an unusual pulpit as well. It's got these marble sculptural faces in it, as well as reddish marble and tile mosaics. Seems very Italian inspired. A very interesting fact about this church is that Penshurst's first priest, Willimus, was installed in 1170 by Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, just 2 days before his murder. This fascinating ancient tomb belongs to the first recorded owner of Penshurst Manor House, Sir Stephen de Penshurst. He was appointed Constable of Dover, and he was knighted and granted the manor of Penshurst in 1299. This is the Sidney Chapel, and its present design dates back to 1822. You can see a beautiful display of heraldic vaults in the ceiling. In this chapel are many monuments to members of the Sidney family who have lived in adjacent Penshurst Place for 500 years. And then this brass plate and cross mark the tomb of Thomas Bullion, brother of Anne Boleyn. And I saw his father's tomb yesterday, which had a different spelling of their surname, just showing that their name changed from Boleyn to Bullion to Boleyn over the years.
I was going to talk about this outside the church, in the porch or in the churchyard, but between the fact that it started raining and the fact that we are clearly right under the flight path for Gatwick, it was far too noisy and wet. So I hopped back in the car just to say, it happens to me every time. I say, oh, another parish church, I'm not going to go. I've vlogged so many of these. And then Ian always persuades me, no, just pop in for a second. And then we walk in and there's these really unique historical things just waiting to surprise us in every church. So that was amazing to see the font. I loved some of the stained glass windows, but also just the medieval carvings that were there and tombs. And Anne Boleyn's brother was buried there. So I'm really glad that I made the effort to go in to the St. John the Baptist Church here in Penshurst. I hope you enjoyed this look at Penshurst Village, Penshurst Place and Gardens. Be sure to check out our videos of the other Henry VIII's wives' castles we visited on this trip, lovely Leeds Castle and beautiful Hever Castle. Thanks so much for watching this video, and do something good in the world today.